Shall we start the meeting here?
Sure.
Seems like we got a decent crowd going there. A lively conversation about EV vehicles from what I hear. Well, I see that we have a decent crowd here on Zoom. We have one new member here, Joy Lindholm. Joy joined us for a previous meeting, and apparently we impressed her, and she decided to join the club. Joy, we're very glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And I see Jim. Uh, would you happen to be James Meyerson?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Awesome, James. James is one of our guests this evening. If you would, James, just take a second to tell us how you found us, what type of photography you like to do, what you might hope to get out of a camera club experience, etc.
Well, I mean, I've always loved photography. When I was younger, I was much more into it, but after quite a long time doing IT, I've kind of finally got around to getting some decent camera equipment, and just the kind of photography I love to do is outdoor photography, like to go out into hiking, the kind of stuff that's behind you and I love all that. So,
There you go. Yeah, if you have a chance to go check out Roxborough Park out there.
oh yes, yep,
Yeah,
beautiful. I love
beautiful spot.
it. Yep.
Well, we're glad you're here. Glad you joined us. I will also be sending you a meeting invite for the next meeting that we have, since you filled out the form on our website. We appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you.
And do we have any guests in the room?
Carl.
Sir?
Yes, we do.
You're okay,
Just stand here.
yeah, anywhere.
Hi. Guy walks into a bar. Two people are sitting next to him, look like they're married and they're eating salad. It's a pizza place. You're like, these people cannot have it all together. But eventually their pizza showed up. So then I decided that we could be friends. And next thing you know, we're talking photography and husband and wife, Laura.
Husband.
And Pat, Laura and Pat, that was last Friday, and they are here.
Fantastic. Well, besides one of our club members dragging you into a meeting, I assume that you folks are interested in photography and want to maybe join a club locally.
Laura has made a full commitment. She has some very nice equipment, camera thing, and 7 or 8 lenses. So, and she's taken all the classes at Mike's, and I said, "Oh no, that's Mickey Mouse." So, so she's all in. She's all in. In fact, before she leaves tonight, I'm going to get them to come in and shoot.
Well, we're happy that you folks joined us, and hopefully that you'll enjoy the competition this evening, learn some stuff, and perhaps join our club. We'd love to have you. Robin, I see you raised your hand. You need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
The Verizon commercial, can you hear me yet now? I just wanted to introduce myself because I am a member in process, which is to say, I've been to one of your meetings once. I've committed to joining the club. Thought I had sent everything in, which seems to have gotten lost somewhere in cyberspace. So I'm going to start it all over again. But I just wanted to say hi and let you know I'm not a figment of your imagination.
Well, we never assumed that. Thank you, Robin. And hopefully we can get all the other stuff squared away. So
Great.
glad to have you here. The only announcements I really have are for our next meeting, which would be Rick Hulbert. He will be doing a presentation on black and white photography called The Lure of Luminance, the power of black and white photography. And of course, next month, our competition is shot with an iPhone. So we want to see your best phone pictures. And actually, a number of people do that already. We have a couple of smartphone images in this evening's competition too, although we won't call those out or talk about them necessarily. And the only other thing I will say is that, we have a push to get our dues paid for previous members, to have that done by our February program meeting. But I still see probably 10 or 12 people who have not re-upped for the year. So if you have not taken care of that, please do that as soon as possible. So this evening's competition is negative space. Definition is balancing your main subject, positive space, with a purposeful amount of negative space. That's the goal. Well-done compositions with negative space tell a more complete story and give context to the main subject. For example, a lone tree with a wide open sky, or someone sitting alone in a park. The space around the subject evokes certain emotions or feelings. And of course, negative space doesn't necessarily have to be wide open, blank space or a heavy shadow or anything like that. It can be an element in the image that is recognizable, but does not actually compete with the main subject as such. And Trish and I discussed that a bit when we had a conversation a couple days ago. And that segues to our judge, Trish Sangelo. Trish has been with us as a judge. I think I looked at the website, and I think every year for the past 5 years or so. It seems like fairly often. She did our Wabi Sabi competition last year. So Trish is a professor and Master of Fine Art and Photography holder from Cranbrook Academy of Art. She's been a gallery director for the Colorado Gallery of the Arts and has been teaching studio arts, commercial fine art photography, and also study abroad at Arapahoe Community College. I've been doing it for more than 30 years. Trish provides legal, marketing, and photography workshops and lectures throughout Denver, besides popping into camera clubs once in a while and judging for them. So, Trish, is there anything that you'd like to add to that, or anything you'd like to say about your judging style for this evening?
Well, I haven't added anything to my jobs this last year. Actually, that's
Good.
not true. I now actually oversee all the events at ACC as well, so I take that back. You've been there a while, you just keep saying yes. As far as my style, as those, you're right, I think it's been 5 or 6 years that I've popped in. As a professor of fine art and commercial photography, I do always focus on looking for elements of art and principles of design. So even with negative space, I will be thinking about how, that is being utilized, especially if it's really empty or if it involves having textures and patterns and things of that nature. So I'll try to be more specific when I'm talking about what's working or what's not. But I think the one thing that I had, Carl and I talked about, I think the key here is, did it work? I'm like, really, that's what it's going to come down to. However you utilize it or what your perception of it is, that's the most important part.
Very good. Well, thank you again for being here with us. We appreciate it very much. So we've got 49 images this evening, and we'll go through them as they're displayed. I will announce the title, then Trish will get your input on the image. We will stop every once in a while for the 9s and the 10s to recognize them and talk to the makers about their images. And depending on how quickly we progress through this, we may take a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle or 2/3 of it. And Trish, just so you know, I just chatted with the maker of that one image we were discussing, and yes, to the right is the way it's supposed to be. Our secret code. Don't worry about it, people. For anybody on Zoom, if you're not muted already, please mute so we can focus on what Trish is telling us about the images. And Bob, if you're ready, let her rip. There we go. Just so people, we know that Zoom mangles images sometimes, makes them a little lower saturation, sometimes a little soft. So if you're seeing a slight tone difference or something on this particular image, just know that the rest of them that you're looking at this evening will be the same way. So hopefully we're really close. So our first image is Bird on a wire.
I'm still going to talk a little bit about just the images in general. I really liked the square format on this one when I was looking at it and how the wire is dividing the image. I also think that the wire sort of helps divide that negative space between the upper and the lower part of the image. The softness of it, I think, works really well. It creates a nice sense of balance for this image. And also just the fact that the color of that negative space is a nice complement as a complementary color to the sort of yellow gold hue on the bird. I will give this one, I actually think I'm going to give this one a 10.
Where are we going?
I really like it. Again, it has that square format, which I think works really good for this particular subject. It helps with the balance of the image. And in this case, I feel like the way the negative space is being used, the softness of it really creates sort of a mystical, magical kind of look to it. And I really also like that part of that image is starting to sort of lose its saturation and having more focus on that front part of the image on the right side. And I think that it really helps really kind of create more perspective with the way that negative space is being used. I will also give this one a 10.
This is just hanging on. And Bob, can you pop that so that they're more full screen? It looks like it's shrunk down just a little bit.
With this one, I'm finding a little bit of tension with the negative space. If you look at the scale of the plane versus even below it, the scale of the negative space, in this case, it isn't as peaceful and as much as harmony as the others we're seeing a little bit more tightness on that one. For me, it doesn't work quite as well in some ways, and it's although it's not centered, it is when on the vertical, and it feels like it needs a little bit more negative space to create a little more interest in the balance. I do love that you can see the pilot in the cockpit, and I love the coloring of it. I do also think, though, that in terms of technical, the plane looks a little washed out and it needs to be a little bit darker so that it doesn't have, like I was saying, that washed out look. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Watch for danger and then seek food.
On this particular one, I feel like the negative space is, even though it is a rich, beautiful blue, if you look at the way it is surrounding the main subject matter, the balance for me is just a tad bit off. It's a little heavy on the negative space. Just that the fact that it is considered very empty, there's no texture or anything to kind of help weigh in that part of the image. When the eye comes up and you go up through the bird and then you're coming over where the bill is, you kind of just exit off. And negative space, although sometimes can be truly empty, it still needs to help hold the weight of the image so that the eye doesn't direct right off. So for me, it needs to be maybe just cropped a little differently. It might help weigh that a little better. I'm going to give this one an 8.
All right, again, this is getting some fresh air.
The format on this one works really nice. I think it really plays up the negative space on this one. And in this case, for me, the negative space isn't just the sky, which has a nice balance with where the horizon line is in relationship to the foreground, but even just the foreground itself having very little main subject in it, and how the two of them kind of come together on this diagonal. And then, of course, it really helps direct the eye to where the main subject is, and then of that perspective. So the negative space plays a heavy, heavy part in part of the directing, and then also, I think, part of the harmony of this image. I'm going to give this one a 10.
This is Christo's Floating Piers.
This one, the negative space to me is, it's not as obvious, I think, as some of the others. It really is more about negative space being utilized in a graphic and in kind of the different shapes, these triangles that are occurring down at the bottom, where the orange portion is the pier, and then of course the water. For me, that's actually more of where the negative space lies versus where the sky is, just because of the way they're intersecting. I think it works really well. I'm not sure it really helps define where the main subject is. I mean, even though the gentleman is something that's really obvious. But I do think technically the top section of the picture where the mountain is, there's some haze going on, as well as the clouds are losing a little bit of their brightness. And so they kind of weigh down the image. And technically, it would be nice to see that first section here in the orange, where it's a little bit brighter, could be more balanced in the sky area. It just is kind of falling flat. But I do appreciate how the negative space is sort of dividing the image up. I'm going to give this one an 8.
There we go. This is Beacon on the Hill.
First, I'd like to say I noticed when I was looking at this one earlier, I looked at it really close, and it is kind of breaking down a little. It might hold up better, at least the saturation of it, when it's printed. But as a digital image, it is kind of looking thin and a little bit washed out. However, the way the space is divided, with the clouds being the negative space, they're very interesting how they kind of create that B shape, but then of course they go right across the top where the horizontal line is. But I'm a little bit distracted by how washed out it is. I feel like the green and the rusty red need to be a little bit more brilliant when we're just looking at it technically. So for me, that's a little distracting and takes away from the way the negative space is supposed to be assisting us as we're viewing it. I'm going to give this one, I'll give this one an 8.
Standing Tall.
Really like the format of this. I always feel like negative space in some ways can really work well, even more so in a square format, just because of the way it throws the weight of an image. The weight on the right, even though it is fairly empty, but it is so dark and it is so rich and saturated that it really does help balance the overall image. Red is a very dominant color. Of course, then you have this lime green and this yellow. And you would think that a plain area couldn't balance something of that dynamic color, but it can. And on this one, that dark section there really balances it well. It, of course, helps with the emphasis of the subject, helps define the subject really well. I do appreciate a little bit of texture and hints of a little bit of palette of color in the back, just so that it's not too flat, adds a little depth. And of course, the texture in the flower itself, it looks really beautiful and is very well done. I'm going to give it a 10.
Eiffel at Night.
This one is also one of those images where it is, the main subject is off to one side, and then you have, and in this case, very solid black, no texture in the negative space. And it is balanced pretty well. When you look at the proportions of it balances really well. But then I wonder if this was a different format, such as square, might that help it? When I sit and try to manually crop it a little differently, I kind of wish the scale of the Eiffel Tower might be a little bigger and that it's brighter to help offset the balance of how deep and rich that black is. But overall, I think it's done very well. I'll give it a 9.
Angels Above.
Oh, so beautiful. And if any of you have, served, I want to thank you for your service. This image instantly made me think about that earlier. It's just how beautiful it is. it's very compressed. It's interesting because I know they're not quite that close together, but they certainly look like it. The balance is really interesting in this because you have the negative space, but the subject matter themselves, the way they visually direct you right up into the corner point, they're moving through that negative space, and then the gradation of, you know, the soft pink as it goes all the way up into this vibrant blue. It's really interesting the way it's balanced, because the negative space is sort of forcing that diagonal at the same time, because that's the way the line works, the linear part of it. But then you've got that gradation. So then your eyes contrasted with the way the negative space is balanced with the color going up and down. So it's really interesting how it directs and controls your eye. And although you have a main subject, often my eyes really moving more through the negative space. It's just interesting how the two are working together. I'm going to give this one a 10.
This is On the Rocks.
This one I really felt like I have a lot of negative space in a way. My eyes kind of floating around looking for the main subject. And often the negative space helps us identify the main subject because the negative space isn't quite as busy as the main subject. And in this case, I can't quite land on it. I do realize that, you know, across the bottom, ideally would be where the negative space is, or possibly that little piece of rope that's going through the image up in the upper right-hand corner. At least that's what I think it is. So in this case, I feel like it's all negative space, and my eyes floating around. And so it's not quite as successful, although it's a beautiful image. When I think of what negative space is, this one is just missing its counterpart of the main subject. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Follow the Light.
Again, in some ways, I kind of feel like I'm looking at a lot of negative space just because the main subject, which is a little competitive, which of course is the footpath, and then you have this bright light right at the cap of the sand dunes. So there is a little competition for the main subject. The texture at the bottom, although is part of the negative space, is actually where my eye wants to land. And so there's competition as to where the negative space really is, or shall I say, where the main focal point is. But again, we do have those intersecting lines where the weight of the image, you know, the eye is flowing at a slight diagonal to the left while we're having this strong horizontal line where the horizon line is. So there's this a little bit of a competition. I also think that the bottom where it sits in the shadow, that is drawing my attention from where I would suspect the main subject is, which again is that path down to the bottom. But the line quality down below is really nice, and how the sand, you know, has that ripple in it from the wind, really does add some nice depth down there. But I'm still seeing a little competition here. There's a little between the top and the bottom as to how the eye flows. So it's not working as effectively as it might, depending. So I'm going to give this one an 8.
This is Pula Tree at Sunset.
Yeah. Again, I just would love to say, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful color palette. The balance, you know, from the top to the bottom, you know, I'd be excited to think that this was the true color. That would be wonderful. I'm not sure if it had, you know, if we bumped it up a little bit in post-production, but it does have a really nice sense of balance. I'm always looking at horizontal, vertical versus square format. So I'm always wondering if if the composition was a little different, if that would help it. And I don't think so. I actually think the horizontal format really helps having that balance, but it's almost divided smack in the center. So you have main subject on one side, and then of course you have all that empty space around it where the negative space lies. So, but it is really nice though how it's filling in. And I'm happy you don't have too much black at the bottom, because then you're having too much competition of where negative space lies. So I think it worked out really well. I'm going to give this one a 9.
And tigers and bears.
Took me a second to figure that out last time, but then I was like, oh, oh my. I really like the composition of this image. I think the negative space is so dramatic. I really like how the clouds have rich white in them, but it's a white that still retains a little texture so it doesn't fall flat. And then how it contrasts with the darkness. So in this case, almost the most dramatic part is the negative space, and the way it is cropped and how clever the word has been cropped as well. But I do think that in this case, the negative space really helps define the composition. I'm going to give it a 10.
This is Pelican in Portrait. And Bob, after this one, let's go back and look at the 9s and 10s and talk to the makers and get their input on their images.
The balance of this is so well done. In this case, it's actually a little more than divided in half. You know, the dark area here on the right is a little bit greater. It carries more of the image, more of the weight. So it really helped offset how dramatic the lighting is on the pelican's face. I think that if it had been pulled in a little bit more, it would have been a little tight and tense. And in this case, it sort of gives you refuge to kind of fall into that negative space and take a little break. The clarity on this image is so well done. I really like how tight it's cropped on the left. It's perfectly cropped right across the bill in a way that isn't tense. It actually still feels very comfortable to look at. And just the way the lighting is all the way down, the little bit, you know, right in the eye, and then right on the tip of the forehead. This, the level of detail and texture you see throughout that whole horizontal section there is so well done. I think it's beautifully done. I'm going to give that a 10.
Okay, well, that gives us about 8 images to come through and look at. Bird on a Wire, this was Dan Greenberg.
Yeah, that's a picture I took in my backyard. And with a very big lens, a 1200mm lens, basically. But that's about it. It was at sunset, and it's a baby woodhouse scrub jay. And that's about all I can tell you.
Very nice. Well, it's great when you can just, you know, not even leave home and get a wonderful image. Where are we going? This is Bill Williams.
Yes, that was taken on a ski lift in Sun Valley, Idaho. And I was really not thinking much about photography, but I got on the lift and you literally couldn't, you didn't do anything to this picture other than just sharpen it a little bit. You literally couldn't see anything. You were going into this huge snowstorm. And it just caught my eye, so I pulled out my phone real quick and snapped the picture.
Did you say phone?
I did say phone. I should have saved it for next picture. But it's great, negative space.
Okay.
Very nice shot, Bill. Thank you. All right, Getting Some Fresh Air. This was Ron Schaller.
Yes, thank you. This was taken on the Oregon coast. There was some sun there, but it was one of those hazy days, and I thought that it worked better in black and white, and I just cropped it to emphasize the space between the main subject and the figures there in the distance.
Hey, that's a really nice image. Thank you. Standing Tall. This is Victoria Ashby.
Yes, thank you for your comments. I took that picture at the Botanic Gardens. I did work a little bit on the background to complement the colors. So that's about it.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Victoria.
Mhm.
And Eiffel at Night, this is Lucius Ashby, who I assume is sitting next to Victoria.
Yeah, this is one of the places that we really like to go off fairly recently off in Paris. So just hanging out in Paris at night, snapped a picture of the Eiffel of the tower.
That's a really nice, very interesting shot. I like that. Angels Above, Todd Lytle.
Imagine that.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Not
Sweetheart.
aircraft, and it might not be my last. That was Colorado Air Show last October, so that was just over in Grand Junction. And I shot for 3 days, so hopefully I get 1 or 2 images out of it.
Well, this is another good one, another stunner. The Pula Tree at Sunset. This is David Besson.
Yeah, this is from my trip to Botswana last May. Thanks for your comments, Trish. The colors were pretty accurate. It was a spectacular sunset that evening. And the Pula tree is really kind of interesting because Pula in the local language, Botswana, means rain. It's this tree that gives all sorts of fruits. It also means it's the money, and it's also the word that's used for toasting, like skål or toast in Botswana. So Pula is a good thing.
Thanks, and thanks for the etymology on the word too. That's interesting. And Tigers and Bears. This is Kyle Durlam.
Thanks, Trish. Yeah, this is something I spent a ton of time with. I kept going, just scrapping everything I did and going back, and I didn't crop it at first I thought it was stupid to go with lions. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna crop it that way. It's for those of you from Denver know that it's exactly the pavilion building downtown. Anyway, I almost threw it away and pivoted somewhere else, but I'm really trying hard this year to shoot fresh for every competition. I didn't want to go back in my catalog, so I stuck with it, and thank you. Really appreciate it.
And who were you with?
David Besson.
Thank you.
Well, it's nice to know that a couple of club members are getting out and shooting together. That's awesome. And also thank you for shooting specifically for a competition. That's actually something that Trish and I talked about when we had our conversation a couple days ago, that some people will go back in their archive looking for images, but other people will look at the subject list, which we do have on the website and has the whole year on it. So you can kind of make some plans, and as you're out shooting, you can think about, in 2 weeks I gotta do this one, and 2 months down the road is this one. And when you're out and about, you can be thinking about the other competitions you have during the year. It's an excellent image, and I love the title too. You're in competition with Terry on titles. This Pelican in Portrait. This is from Laura Blake. And Laura does not have a microphone available, so she put in the chat that this brown pelican was on a cliff in La Jolla, California, and she was able to get quite close with her long lens. Great image. I really like that. This will be Super Carpenter.
Which makes me laugh. But first, I wanted to say, and Carl, you had mentioned this, we all shoot a lot. So we have lots of images we can reference when we're looking for subject that fits different types of competition. But I truly think that when you intentionally shoot for a topic, it really does benefit the image better, because it's not, it might fit, it does fit. So do consider that if you have time to look at those topics and then shoot for them, you're going to be much more successful and intentional. This one made me laugh when I saw the title. It almost, by the way, looks like it's solarized. If you look around the edge of our little worker there, the white, it's almost like a Mackie line that's going around it. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's also very humorous, by the way. So, which all really drew my attention more than the negative space. The negative space in this one, and it looks almost like a composite image to me. It's just fine. It's just how sharp the line is around the subject, and then across the top of the building. yet the rest of the lines are soft, and the background is soft. So it does have a nice sense of balance. The negative space which is in the sky and the cloud format, it balances really nice, but there's something super quirky about this image that keeps making me try to figure it out. It's quite puzzling to me. So, and the contrast on it is done really well too. It's nice that you have white in that negative space, because since the main subject is so dark with the out or uniform, sorry, it really does help create a little depth in there. So I'm going to give this one a 9.
Dunes Rendezvous.
Love that little pop of color in there. The composition in general is really beautiful, and the way the line flows and how the eye travels really softly, you know, along the sand dunes, and that the shadows are still nice and soft, even though they're really deep, and the way they kind of just softly cascade and then kind of, you know, softly blend out. For me, there's not that much negative space. To me, this is all positive space. I know that the sand dune itself is, you know, a smooth surface, but there's a lot of lines going on in here. Your eye is constantly moving through. And for me, I don't have a place to land and have quiet, except for maybe right smack in the middle. So it's not as effective when I think of what negative space might look like, which is that place of rest or a little bit of emptiness, not a lot of activity, and those shadows are pretty deep. So it's really not having that moment of negative space. Beautiful picture though, but I'm going to give it an 8 just because I think it falls a little short of what negative space really is, but it is a beautiful image.
Just a question, since there was such a, you know, just dichotomy between the use of the negative space and possibly the score. Could the maker ask that it either be removed, or, you know, if you get a 7, you can use it again another time? I mean, I hate, this is a beautiful image, but it doesn't fit the definition, and therefore it gets an 8. I mean, either throw it out or give it a 6 and let them be not counted.
Okay, here's my take on it. When we have an assigned topic, we have a specific definition that we apply to it. I give you people resources to look at to you know, to further explain or to help you understand what the topic is all about.
Yes, that.
People make their own decisions as to what image they are going to submit for a particular competition, whether it's a strong image or a weak image for that particular competition. And once it's in, we're not going to take it out. Now, I will say that there were a couple of images that I did talk to the maker and ask them, are you sure you want to put this in? I don't necessarily think it strongly defines negative space. And 2 people did replace their images. But this one, this was a borderline image for me. And obviously it's a judge's opinion too. But no, we're not going to just pull an image just because it got an 8. Just because somebody thinks it's a 9 or a 10.
I agree.
I agree.
That's all I'll say about it. So.
And this is why when I get, even in class, I give an assignment, I don't allow students to use their I teach darkroom. Primarily, it's my favorite. I don't let them use negatives from any previous assignments, because I need them to be super intentional about whatever the topic is or whatever goals we're trying to work through. Because it's easy for us to think something will fit, but when we're really shooting, it really will fit better when you do it intentionally. It is a beautiful image, so I appreciate that you guys were thoughtful about that.
Okay, let's continue. This is Elk Visit to Estes Park.
Great balance. really nice balance. This is one again where we're seeing a main subject balanced very well against its its negative space. When you have negative space that is a little empty, even if it has a hint of texture or a pattern to it, a highlight or a color, it still can look unbalanced. But in this case, the size of the space, the depth and the gradation of it, a hint of texture, it doesn't draw your attention away from of the main subject. So it's balanced really beautifully. And the color palette is really nice as well and complements that. I'm going to give this one a 9. I'm sorry, I was looking at the color thinking maybe it could be popped a little more.
Seashells.
It's an interesting perspective, having the foreground be a little soft and then our background's a little soft. So the eyes really do land right in where the main focal point is, which is where the seashells are. For me, this would be another one where maybe I start questioning how negative space is being utilized. There's still enough texture and sand. I know it's soft, but then you'll see pockets of subject matter that are pretty defined. And then the shoreline, right? And then you see where the water breaks. It's very defined. Really, for me, the only negative space is really the top section. And in that case, it's only of a third of it. So it doesn't really carry the weight it needs really to create a nice balance of negative versus positive. So for me, I'm a little torn in between those two places of does it really fit the bill of how negative space can be utilized more. So I'm going to give this one an 8.
On Thin Ice.
Really well done. It's just really well done. The weight. I also like that a lot of times we're seeing the weight on the left side, but to me, that sometimes can tip a little. For me, when you see the weight really on the right side of the print, it's a little more dramatic because it's like putting an exclamation point at the end of a word being on that side. The color palette is so soft and subtle, but just enough to hold interest even in the soft areas across the top where we're seeing this vertical line. And then just the crispness of the ice along, where the fox is walking, and just the color, the pattern. I like the motion, but I'll tell you, the whole subject's almost, in some ways, mostly negative space, yet it is so well balanced and interesting. This is one where I feel like the negative space really defines the mood. It really defines the isolation. I mean, it really adds aesthetically to that subject matter. I would give it a 10.
Walking on the line between light and shadows.
I'm always drawn to black and white, being I teach darkroom, but I really do like the level of texture. Granted, the texture is supposed to be our negative space, but I don't think it takes away from the main subject. My eye still keeps landing on the people. Now, people are naturally a directive. They automatically draw your eye in. So when you have the scale of them is bigger, so you can see them more than maybe in the previous image where they were really small, so they didn't draw your attention as much. Here they do. So I think there is a nice balance between what we would identify as the negative space being the shadowed area, but yes, as well as the area that's lit. And I think that the negative space in this case is also defining the perspective, which is really nice because it helps draw the eye up and through the main subject and over. So it adds a really nice 3-dimensional depth to it. And I just like how natural everything feels within the subject, and it really is balanced really lovely. And also the texture of it again, which is our negative space, sort of defines where the subject is, what the natural environment is. I'm going to give it a 10.
Peering through the sand.
The weight is really nice. The square format works very well for this. I'm a little lost in the subject. I mean, in terms of it's not eye-catching to me. It's very rich. The color, the green, it's very bright. It's well done. The subject for me is lacking a little. It is abstract, which I do like. And it's a perfect example of how you can use negative space to sort of make the eye flow and define where it is. Adds a little interest to an image that might not on its own maybe hold the interest as well, or even feel more casual or more like a snapshot than something that is intentionally composed. But for me, the subject is still not quite strong enough. So I'm going to give it an 8.
First date.
This was one where I was a little kind of trying to decide about the negative space, the way it was used. There's so much line quality going on. I mean, if you look from top to bottom, there's almost like a straight line cutting right through it at an angle there. And then, you know, you have a horizontal line at the base where the stairs are. So there's a little competition of sort of where the eye is landing as to what negative space is, because they are directives and they're really stopping the eye for me. But there is negative space, you know, on the sides here, and then of course a little bit off in the background of the sky. It's really well printed. I really like the contrast on it. I love where the main subject is. It really just sort of softens that. It breaks where the hard line is. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Shark in the water.
This one stuck with me today. I was thinking about this one a little bit. I tried to look at all the images earlier so I could kind of think through them, and I really like the use of color. And I think the way the negative space is being utilized, color is a big part of that, because although the shark is a main subject, and in some ways so is the rock line, but they're complementary colors of each other. They're kind of that, you know, sort of the blue, orange, even though it's a little bit more, you know, green and yellowy, but they really do complement themselves really nice. So the color was a great way, by having so much of it capitalize on what would have been the negative space. The texture of it is pretty the same throughout. If you look at the way the water is textured versus the rock, there's the same sense of size and repetition within those. So that's really nice. It's almost seamless the way it flows. And then your eye will land on that main subject and where it's located. And I think it's beautifully balanced, and the square format is key. If this was a horizontal image or even a vertical image, I don't think the eye would flow as intentionally. So it's a really nice crop on this one. I'm going to give it a 10.
Peaceful.
It is peaceful. The balance of it is what makes it peaceful. The amount of negative space across the top really helps balance the weight of the bottom. If this one was cropped tighter, like a more of a panoramic, it actually would have more tension. And so having that level of emptiness versus the amount of depth at the bottom, there's that little sliver has a lot going on, and it balances beautifully. The other thing is it's soft. The top is very soft, and it really balances the texture and the contrast between the highlights and shadows at the bottom. I think it's really well done. I'm going to give that one a 10.
Lonely Grebe.
This is another one I thought about a lot today. I just thought that the emotional aspect of it is so well done. Having a main subject primarily being the only thing in an image, and having a lot of emptiness around it and that sense of isolation, it can feel, in this case, because it's soft, the subject matter feels very soft, and it even kind of has almost like a vignette feel to it, is very peaceful, and just how the air, has a hint of texture, a little bit of fog, a little bit of that moisture coming off the water, and then it almost, you get this sense of having this little ring around the duck, coming out, really helping sort of define that subject, and then having that softness. It's really well done. The contrast on it is also, I think, what makes it really successful. Having that rich darkness around the edge, even though it's negative space, it's really defining the subject matter and the placement. So I'm going to give this one a 10.
This is Trapped in the Ice, and Bob will break for the 9s and 10s after this one, please.
I feel trapped when I look at the image. It's interesting how some images will make you sit and try to figure it out. This one, when I even thought of the title, I'm like, what's trapped? Is that a rock? Is that the top of an animal's head? I mean, like, I really sat and stared at it and zoomed in. I was looking for an eye. I didn't know what I was looking for. So it's kind of interesting the way the title sort of directed me. It's just, for me, this one is not quite as interesting. You have a lot of negative space, but the negative space, short of being ice, isn't really helping me define the subject or make sense of it for me. When I look at it, it's lacking a little of I had a hard time even, I knew I was going to have a hard time talking about this one. It's just not quite as interesting when I look at it, because I don't really know what I'm looking at. And I think that's it. But it does define negative space. I mean, you have done that. The format of it being square works good, but just as an image overall, it's just not really as intriguing. I'm going to give this one, an 8.
We're going to jump over to the Super Carpenter, and that is from Steve Wilton.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. Yeah, that's not a composite, and the sharp lines that you're seeing, there was a halo around the guy and the top of the floor. So I spent a lot of time in Photoshop cloning that out. I guess I was a little too precise on it, but that's what caused that effect.
Still love that image. That's great, Steve.
Thanks.
Elk Visit to Estes Park. This is Gwen Patton.
Yeah, like the title says, it was taken at the lake in Estes Park, like late afternoon, in October. Not this past October, but an October.
One of the Octobers.
It's really nice, Gwen. And Trish mentioned the balance between the things too, and I saw that too. The shadowy area up at the top right versus the elk itself, and then on the other diagonal, you've got the color variation from yellow to blue. That's really nice.
It seems like on my computer, it always looked like that upper left had more color than when I see it. Yeah.
It probably does. Zoom does sometimes desaturate images a little bit.
Okay, thanks for the comments.
On Thin Ice, this is Terry Hanford.
I was actually out trying to shoot birds down by the reservoir, which was frozen over, and here this critter came across, and in the back there were actually 3 bald eagles on the ice that I cloned out because I thought they were distracting from it. I think it was one of the things that Carl put out there as a source. And it talked about putting things to one side or the other, indicating either how far they'd gone or how far they have to go. So actually I put this a little farther to the right to indicate how far this had to go because he was way out in the reservoir. I'd also like to say that I think almost uniformly, the members have really dug deep tonight. I've really enjoyed the pictures. I think people have really done some of their best work I've seen this year tonight. So thank you for that. And thank you for your comments.
Well, thanks for the explanation, Terry. And that was I guess, a good choice to take the birds out of there because that does add to that negative space and the effectiveness of the image itself. Walking on a line between light and shadow is Ben Henderson. Excuse me, Ben Hernandez. Sorry about that, Ben.
That's all right. I prefer horrendous, but that's okay. So this image was taken in Toledo, Spain, one of the most fascinating cities that I've been in, where many different religions worked, and they managed to create a society with inclusion and tolerance. So this particular image was high noon. I was walking around with my camera thinking, what can I shoot when the sun is right on top of me? And this is what I was able to shoot. So I appreciate the comments. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that the high noon lighting accentuates the texture in the wall there. So that was a good catch.
Hey, and I should mention I'm going to be in Toledo, Spain this summer teaching, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, a wonderful city. If you've never been there, I
have.
really love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, a couple times. I love it. Yeah.
Awesome.
And first date, this is from Cecilia Zapata.
Yeah, so this photo was taken in downtown Denver. I bought my very first camera last summer, and this is my very first outing. And I'm surprised with the score, but thank you for your comments.
Cecilia, was that with the group or a different time?
No, that was a different time. It was the same day that I took the skateboarder shot.
Yeah, right.
Oh my.
Great job.
Just walked around downtown for, I think it was like 3 hours just taking, I have almost 2,000 shots. Just walking down.
Hey, well, that's the best way to learn is to just go out there and shoot and take a bunch of images because you learn from the mistakes, you learn from the good ones too. And don't be surprised by the score because personally, from what I've seen of your work, you're on the right track. You're doing good.
Thank you.
Shark in the Water. This is from Allie Green. I don't believe that she's here this evening. She's mentioned this was taken in South Africa, looking down while hiking the Roberg Peninsula in Plettenberg Bay. So if you ever want to see sharks and you're in South Africa, go to there, Plettenberg Bay. And Peaceful is from Oz Fenninger.
Yeah, so I took this on our trip to Antarctica. This is actually in the Falkland Islands, using a fairly long lens. And I normally don't have a lot of sky in my pictures like here. So I was quite curious what a judge would think. I personally had liked it. And thanks, Trish, for also liking it. It's very peaceful for me. And yeah, that's about it.
Lonely Grebe, this is from Matthew Hazelgren. Is Matt in the room? I don't think he's on Zoom tonight.
No, not in the room.
Okay.
He's very silent.
He left a comment here when he filled out the form on the website. This is a pre-dawn silhouette, misty surroundings only possible when the water temperature is above the air temperature. I spent several cool fall mornings sitting knee-deep in water to get this shot. Well, Matt, when you're watching recording, yeah, congratulations. This paid off. This excellent image.
And he is going on the crane shoot, so got to keep him out of the water.
Yeah. See what you can do about that. All right, Todd. Okay, we are a little bit more than halfway through. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break here. Get people to get up, get a drink, stretch your legs, whatever you need to do, and we shall resume in 5. All right, everybody, that's about a 5. If we could take our seats, let's get back to finishing up our competition for the evening. Hey, Bob, we need the next image, please.
Up there.
There we go. There we go. Into the wild blue yonder.
Great. This one has really nice sense of balance. It has that same complementary color scheme that's going on between sort of the orange gold colors and the teal blue colors. The negative space is really nicely balanced between the colors as well as the texture and how it's divided, while the pelican is kind of moving into, I'm assuming a pelican, moving into the image. It has a really nice sense of balance. If the pelican had been in the darker area, it would not have worked as well. So being able to have that more silhouette effect worked really nicely. I do feel like the color might need a little bit more of a pop. There's something about that's a little bit flat. It could be the zoom on there, just to keep that in mind. But I'm going to give this one a 10. It's really well balanced.
Making snow.
I thought it was kind of interesting. It almost looks like there's a cross in the cloud or the snow formation there in the background. It really is really interesting, the balance on this image. I feel that the subject of all the people and everything is kind of the perspective on that works really nicely. And the darkness that goes around it is kind of creating, it's not quiet because of the way it's formed all the way around it. This one, it's a little bit, there's a little competition going on between the subject around the outside versus the subject in the inside, and then having that piece of machinery shoot through it. It kind of breaks it up and kind of disrupts the image right there. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Bad moon rising.
This one I think might have worked better as a square format as I look at it and I give it a slight crop. The weight of it is a little bit heavy in the negative space versus where the subject matter is. I am happy it's not like perfectly in the corner there, that it's a little bit off center, so that helps. I think that the contrast on it works really nice. You know, obviously the background would be solid. And so I think that creates a nice balance, but the weight of it, where the negative space is not completely working for me. It's a little bit off. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Fly in the friendly skies.
I like how the bird is like right where the line separates between, you know, the softness of the clouds versus the blueness of the sky. It's kind of a nice place to be, and it's almost kind of following that same shape and contour of the bird. It really plays nicely there. The negative space, and it really works for the subject. I also think it helps that the wings are down, because it's not just a straight line, and it helps add a little bit of the vertical line while we have all this horizontal going on. And the balance of having this weight here on the right side really helps weight the subject there. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Where is everybody?
The balance on this one, again, works pretty good. I think when we use a lot of negative space, that not, you know, having at least probably half of it kind of helps the weight of the main subject. This one here, though, for me, it feels a little undersaturated. It's a little washed out when I look at it. Even if that is the true color of the image, it's a little soft, and it kind of everything kind of gets lost in there for me when I look at how neutral the bird is versus the background. But it does have some nice texture in there. Having texture, I think, helps that subject and keeps that eye flowing even through your negative space. I'm going to give this one, and it does look very intentional. I'll give this one an 8.
Bus stop.
It's interesting that the weight is on the left side because it almost feels like it needs to be flipped for the way the weight is. It feels very tipped. I almost wonder in this case if it had a little bit more negative space, if it would help balance me. It's more than just a bench. It's also a tree. And so that's a lot of weight, and it's really far down in that left corner, which really draws the eye down. And the negative space, although beautiful, and just the way you captured that early snow, it's not disrupted, everything is smooth, and it just outlines all the trees so beautifully. It just feels a little heavy on one side. I would like to have seen a little more negative space to help balance that, just because how tight it's cropped on that side. Just to keep in mind, this one, although I like the square, might have the weight of it might have worked better if there was a little bit more, almost like a horizontal shot. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Icy dip.
The balance is really nice on this. I really like having the main subject pushed up a little. It really helps that bottom section feel weighted. Even though there's nothing down there, it's soft. That foreground definitely is out of focus. But the way the line goes up, where the water is open, where the ice is, and then you still see the texture of the ripple in the water. That whole section right there balances beautifully with all your negative space. And also the color of the negative space is really nice. It's soft, it's lighter, it complements the subject really well. I'll give this one a 10.
Open skies.
Great title for this one. The weight on this one works really nice. I'm happy it's not right in the corner. It's pushed out over to the left a little bit, so it helps define that shape a little bit better. It's also fun that the plane is going the same direction as the cloud shape is, and so the eye flows really nicely back and forth. And by having that upper corner a little darker as the eye follows the plane, it hits that dark area and comes back down, so you don't exit off of it. A lot of times when you have a light area, the direction of the main subject, your eye will exit. And so it's really nice how it holds it in. It's also nice that you have some texture and some highlights and shadows in your sky, and it's not just flat. And so even though that is a lot of negative space, there's some nice soft motion in there, and it really does give you a sense of the movement that's going on. I'm going to give this one a 10.
Little bee eater.
Great texture. Really happy that the background is soft focus. I think that really helps with identifying it being negative space. If it was sharper, the eye would move around in there a little bit more and be trying to identify subjects. So it really does fit the bill for, oh, no pun intended, fits the bill for it being a negative space. And then having all that subject right here on the right side. And then the direction, and that's the thing, that the direction is leading into the negative space instead of away from the negative space. And I think that's what makes it feel more balanced. I'll give this one a 10.
Getting down.
Good contrast. I really like how what would be the negative space is leading into it. I will say that this one is another one where I felt like the foreground, although might be where you're identifying the negative space is, to me doesn't feel like negative space because it's so active. It truly is leading into the main subject. And so even when my eye lands on the main subject, I come back to that lower section and I toggle between the two. it's very active. And in that case, it's for me isn't working quite as well as if that had been a smoother surface, or maybe a darker surface or something that takes away some of the directive off of that, the texture that keeps catching my eye. So for me, when I think about what negative space is, maybe not so much on this one. Although beautifully done, I really like the image. I like what is happening with the perspective on it, but I'm not sure it meets what I think negative space ideally would be. I'll give this one, and only because of that, an 8.
Poolside.
This one's interesting. As you look at it, when you think of it in an abstracted image, it works really nicely. The weight of absolute nothingness on the left versus the patterns that we're seeing and the shapes on the right. But I keep wanting to tip and look because of the way it's directed. But it is really interesting, and I'm happy that it's not on this side because your eye would float right off. So you come this way and then it pushes you back the way that the direction is. So it's really interesting how it plays with your mind a little bit of the orientation that they selected to display it in. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Meditate. And after this, we will talk to the 9s and 10s since we're having so many of them in this section here.
Okay. I know you guys have some really great images for this one. Although I like the last one too, Wasabi. That was really good. This is a very successful black and white image. The high contrast on it really works well for this particular subject matter. The whites are super crisp and still retain all their highlights and their texture at the same time. The balance of it is so interesting. And this is where, for me, negative space really helps the image sort of surpass just being a photo of something interesting, where now the negative space is playing a role in it, the abstraction or the storytelling. It also kind of adds a kind of a mystical kind of feel to it. The black is so well done. That solid texture, being that it's a high contrast anyway, works perfectly for this image. And the weight being at the bottom, but shifted over a little, the way it goes up, but then you have these diagonals. There's a lot of things that are happening in this image that are just executed and seem to be very well thought out. I will give this one a 10.
All right, we're going back to the bird in the sky. There you go. Into the Wild Blue Yonder from Todd Lytle.
Thank you. My daughter was married in Mexico in December on the Pacific, and my daughter had a mandate that as the father of the bride, I wasn't allowed to take any pictures during the wedding, as in none. So the only way I survived was to hire the best wedding photographer in Denver, Colorado, a gentleman by the name of Travis Broxton.
Awesome.
And then afterwards, I was able to go get some pictures. So that's from right after the wedding, from the 7th story of a condo. I don't know that it would have to be over the ocean. It happened to be over the ocean. And so I think some of those updraft winds showed up. The original of this, that bird was probably a half mile away, maybe more. So it's a pretty long lens. In the original, that bird was dead center. And so there was as much to the left and to the bottom as there is here. And so really, I only did 3 things. I cropped it. I put the bird directly on the rule of thirds cross. I mean, like bullseye on the rule of thirds. It had to be, it didn't have to be. I flipped the image. The original image, the sky was predominantly Boulder on the left side and the bird was flying more right to left. So I flipped it, and then I think I did 1 or 2 Vivesa filters, and that's it. The cropping was the main thing.
Well, the end result was a great image.
Thank you.
Bad Moon Rising. This is from Rick Carter.
Yeah, thank you, Trish. Appreciate your comments. The cropping of it was, yeah, I tried a lot of different stuff, and I just picked that one. It's a shot I took at when we were walking around Littleton. The club had a photo walk over there earlier. So just it was a big giant moon, and yeah, it's 300 millimeter lens.
Very nice. Excellent result, Rick.
Thanks.
Flying the Friendly Skies. This is Ron Schaller.
Thank you, Trish. This was taken down at Monte Vista a couple of years ago, and we were just shooting all day, and there were a lot of groups of cranes flying, and every once in a while you get a solo crane, and just had some nice afternoon light, and just cropped it a bit and did a little bit of sharpening on it. Thank you.
Excellent. Very nice image. Very nice, John. Bus Stop. This is from Joy Lindholm.
Hi, thank you so much, Trish. I'm super excited, everybody. My first competition. So yeah, really happy. Thank you so much for the feedback. This is a bus stop a couple of blocks from my house. Actually, was out on a walk at sunset and snapped this on my phone. So was pretty happy with the way it turned out. I really debated cropping the sky down a little further and kind of putting the tree line right through the middle of the horizon, but ended up going a little bigger. So thank you so much for that feedback, and I'll play with it a little bit more.
Well, congratulations on a great score on your first competition, Joy.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Icy Dip. This is Victoria Ashby.
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, I was down at the Broadmoor, and I did shoot this, particularly for tonight's competition. It was snowy and cold, and I walked around the lake, and of course there were a lot of ducks and swans out there. So I shot it. It wasn't quite that close, but I cropped it, and I did like the openings in the water and the soft colors. So again, thank you for your comments, Trish.
Okay, and Open Skies. This is from Sean Slade.
Thank you very much, Trish, for the comments. Since Todd Lytle has the fighter jet market cornered in Colorado, I had to travel up to Montana for work, and we're doing some testing of flying drones long ways and streaming video and stuff back. And this drone was flying overhead, and the storm clouds were rolling in, and I just loved how the contrast, on the sky with the dark clouds and the silhouetted drone worked out, and did a little bit of cropping like everyone to get this kind of down in that bottom right area, going into the dark cloud area. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sean. It seems like wherever you travel to for work, you always come back with a couple images.
I try. I pack my camera with me. Going to Okinawa next month, so hopefully I'll get some good stuff there.
Oh, very nice. Little Bee Eater. This is from David Besson.
Yeah, this is just a little bee eater, sitting on a log waiting for a bee to go by. But no, fortunately I was able to, the lens was long enough that the background fell into this nice soft focus, and I was pretty pleased with it, so I didn't have to do too much to this image. I just sharpened it a little bit because I wanted to bring out the detail on the feathers, especially on the wonderful red eye. But thank you for your comments, Trish.
Was it taken in Englewood?
I think it was actually in Lakewood. No, this was from Botswana.
Okay.
I used that.
We don't have such pretty birds around here, it seems.
Yeah, this was part of David's collection of 25,000 images or whatever he had from his Africa trip.
1,322 to go,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, competition worthy stuff for many years to come. Poolside. This is from Laura Blake. And Laura typed in the chat here that she says that I flipped a photo of the pool on its side as a play on the words of the title, Poolside. I thought the abstract look was more interesting. And apparently, so did Trish. I really like this image. This is really cool looking. I like it. And we've got Meditate from Steve Wilton.
Thank you, Trish. This was taken in Boulder at the Shambhala Center. And what I liked about it, initially drew me to it, were the lines in the roof, how they point up to the subject on both sides there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Another excellent black and white image from you.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got about 10 more images left, so let's get through our last little batch here. And this will be Pushing Through Powder.
Very fitting for Colorado. The negative space on this one is that there's a lot of it. We have it, you know, coming up and around, and the subject definitely looks like, you know, that they're very isolated in the snow. That to me looks miserable, actually, being from Florida. But I do think that it might have worked a little bit more, like when I take my hand and I cover up the tree to the left, or trees to the left, then I feel it. Then I can see it. I can see more isolation. I can really feel how the negative space is really showing the feel of what's occurring in this landscape. But for me, that one little section is sort of disrupting the flow of the negative space. So when we're doing negative space, think about the things that might be around it that are disrupting it, and try to, you know, consider cropping it out or removing it. But that for me is a big part of it when I look at it. And I also think being able to, it does fall a little flat. I get that it's in the snow, and so it has that kind of muted look to it. It's a little bit monochromatic. But I do think a little pop would also help that subject kind of hold its weight in such a big area, being that it's a large rectangle. So keep those things in mind. And it does fall a little blue to me. Snow is so hard. I mean, you never know which way to take it without losing everything in the process. So I'm going to give this one an 8.
A heavy 10 inches.
That also looks miserable. Great color usage though, but this is again where the snow is falling a little bit on the blue side. There is a hint of magenta to it, but it's not as true white as it could be. Snow is hard. We're going to lose texture and detail if we go too white. So I understand all that. The way the lines take you into where the subject is, and then having all that negative space. I kind of wish that upper section was not as shadowed, because again, your eye starts to move up through that negative space and it kind of narrows it down. So it feels very, it's almost like the top maybe quarter of it is not as effective as the part underneath it. So it kind of throws the balance of the image a little bit. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Out for a stroll.
I think that the composition on this one works really nice. This is the opposite of what I just said. Having that little rock right there in the right really helps the image not feel like it's leaning. It helps hold the subject in. And the negative space around it with the blue sky and then the white really kind of creates a nice balance to the main subject. And being that the head is leaning in, it's nice that that's where the negative space in, so that it helps create a nice balance on that. I'm going to give this one a 10.
Plotting for the noble cause.
It has a kind of a tension to it with the way that you're looking through, where the foreground is so soft all the way around it, almost like a vignette, the way it's working. It's has that little bit of a voyeuristic feel to it. It's kind of interesting. The balance is really, really interesting. The texture, there's a lot of texture in that, but it works really nicely for the subject, especially that feeling like we're looking through those leaves while the animal or the bird is, you know, kind of cropped down in the midst of its hunt. So it's kind of, I just really like how it has that feel around it and the way it's balanced. And it having the tree and then having that branch help sort of define the weight here, and then having that little bit of darkness up there, I think holds that eye in again. So I'm going to give this one a 9.
Oh, how did I get up here?
Yeah, this one made me laugh. I love this. This is fun. It's so quirky. It is the contrast on this is a little flat. I do wish that in the sky where the pockets of white are could be a little brighter. I feel like we're in the mid part of the grayscale. You have a nice black, few nice dark grays, but what we're really missing is that true white to help give it that visual depth it needs, and it kind of flattens the image. So keep that in mind, just brightening it up just a little where those pockets are going to add a little more depth in there would work really great. The composition is really nice. This is one also where I feel like it doesn't have a lot of negative space. I'm not sure the negative space is really defining it or creating some of the interest in the image. Because the image goes almost straight through, the bulk of the image is main subject. So for me, I'm not sure it fits the bill again. It probably needed a little bit more sky if we're really thinking about utilizing negative space effectively. Although the composition is really nice and the image is really fun to look at. I'm going to give it an 8, and it's just because I don't really think it fits the subject matter.
Up, looking down, going forward.
This is really a really nicely balanced image. The main subject being, you know, divided like that off to the left, the texture of the stone and the person, the highlights on the clothing work really good. The grayscale, then you've got this silverish kind of gray going on, and then that rich black. I mean, it is solid. There's nothing there. And it balances beautifully. Even though it's a very large section, there's enough texture where the main subject is to balance it really well. It feels very intentionally cropped. I'm going to give it a 10.
A desert hike.
This is another one where I was trying to feel where the balance is. It really feels like 2 sections of negative space. I feel like the main subject is so small that you almost can't identify it. And for me, where I'm really looking is at that crest where you see a hint of shadow right above where the people are. That to me is where the main focal point lies, just because that's where my eye is drawn to. Has a really nice composition. It does feel a little flat to me again. I feel like I need a hint more highlight. The brightest part are those tiny little pants off in the distance. I kind of wish that maybe a little bit of the sand had a little bit more highlight in it, just so that the eye has a place to land. Because right now, solid black, and then in some ways, almost the same scale of gray all on the bottom. So the eye is just kind of trying to find its place. But the composition is really interesting. And so the only suggestion would be just adjusting that contrast level just a little bit. I am going to give it a 9.
Treasure from the ocean.
This one, the subject matter for me is just kind of falling short when I think of all the different ways the seaweed can kind of create abstract shapes. Been there, done. I mean, I'm from Florida. I've seen a lot of seaweed in my time. And because it fills almost the whole image, it's not allowing the negative space to play off of it. Instead, the negative space is just wrapped around it, and it's not offering anything different or unique. It's not changing the way we read it or feel it when we look at it. It just looks like you just kind of cropped in. I would consider, when you're thinking about negative space, shifting it one direction or the other, or having more of it. Maybe if this had been shifted a little bit to the left, just the composition itself is too predictable. It's too centered in terms of its overall weight. So again, I think it's just a matter of adjusting the cropping on it. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Why run when you can fly?
It's amazing how they do that. This one's got a pretty good balance on it. I mean, you have a little bit of texture over here on the right, but it doesn't really take away from it. I do think that it would help. It's a little centered. I mean, it's not in the center, but it's close enough that I kind of wish it was shifted a little bit. If I take my hands and I just crop it a little, I would like to get rid a little bit of this lower right-hand side and that lower bottom where the corner is, just so that it feels like we're getting the distance of what is about to happen. It kind of falls short on the right side. I mean, on the left side, it kind of crops too tight when you think about what's about to happen. So just think a little bit about that cropping when we think about the use of negative space. And someone earlier said that Carl had mentioned that the space on one side could tell you where they've come from or where they're going. This is exactly what that falls into, is where is it going? And then it ends, and seeing more would help with that vision of what's about to happen. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Our final image is titled Alone.
Now, I kind of suspect this might be the black and white version of one that we showed much earlier that didn't have the boat in it. It has a similar, like where I can see the line. This one works better if it happens to be, or if two people are in the same place at the same time. What I like about this one is that you really get a sense of how that negative space is impacting the solitude of the boat and really creating more of an emotional impact to the image. First of all, the boat, the contrast, having that brightness against the gray, and then the shadow being black, that in itself is really dramatic. And then having a lot of this negative space, although it has texture, and it works really well in black and white. I think that adds enough weight that's where the drama comes from. This is where that heavy weighted balance works really well. I also think that the contrast on this works really, really good for you guys. I had wanted to say a few times earlier, when you're doing black and white, when you're shooting digital versus a dark room, sometimes I feel like people don't allow the black and white image to truly have contrast, that they stay more in the grayscale. And what you find is in dark room, we're generally more contrasty because it's the nature of the paper. So in digital, consider a little higher contrast when you're working. Don't just fall in the grayscale. Have that true white, have that true black. That's what's going to add the depth to the image, that illusion of depth. And then that grayscale is where the eye will find sort of its resting place. So I did want to offer up that suggestion, being that I'm a darkroom printer. But I'm going to give this a 10. Thank you. It's beautiful.
Wow. And I forgot to mention that this image was submitted for critique only, but you hit all the high points of what all the important things about black and white and about tonality and all that good stuff. So, all right, let's go back a bit and talk to a few of our 9s and 10s. And we've got Out for a Stroll from Jenna Dockweiler. She popped into the chat saying that she doesn't have a working microphone. Thank you so much for the comments. This was in Antarctica and was taken from a Zodiac. The penguin posed himself perfectly against the blue sky for me. It's so nice when your subject cooperates with you, even non-human ones. It's an excellent image. That's great. Plotting for the Noble Cause. This is Terry Hanford.
I had worked for a long time with this in black and white, and I was almost didn't submit it because there was so much texture in the out of focus leaves that it was distracting. And then I took that back to the green that pulled it together. And also you can see actually on the back of the crow that there's a green streak there because it was actually a long lens and there was a leaf out of focus, put color onto the back of the bird. Anyway, I also struggled a bit with the black bird with a black eye and trying to get that contrast in there. Anyway, this was my first shot at doing that. And thank you for your comments.
All your efforts were successful, Terry. That's a good image. Up, looking down, going forward. This is from Ben Hernandez.
I thought we agreed that it was Ben Hernandez, but that's okay. So one of the things that you mentioned, Trish, is that this image was intentionally cropped, and it certainly was. Within my short tenure with this group, the amount of comments and feedback that I've gotten had allowed me to truly see things differently. Granted, I did not take this image for this particular subject, but I did go to a library from a recent shot back in November. And once again, the feedback that I've gotten and people looking at my work and kindly taking the time to offer some feedback allowed me to go ahead and push some boundaries. And I did crop this image tightly just for the subject matter. So I do appreciate your comments. I'm happy it worked. And thank you. Thank you all for the great comments and the great feedback. And for allowing us to grow as photographers and artists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, this was a fantastic image. I just love that the way it split, the balance between the two sides is awesome. Very awesome. A desert hike. This is from Allie Green. The only comment that she left was that this was taken at Great Sand Dunes National Park, which sometimes it's hard to get close to people when you're out there. Alone, this was from Ken Burns. Ken, would you like to talk a little bit about this image and processing and everything?
The only comment that I'll make is, Trish, thank you for the feedback. I had a bit of consternation whether to submit this one as the negative space or the other one that you so adroitly recognized. So thanks for the comment on both.
And thank you for that, Ken. Yeah, this was a really nice black and white conversion. And that is it for the evening. That is all of our competition images. Now, hopefully everyone got some good information, learned something about their images and everybody else's. Trish, I want to thank you for all of your commentary, all of the good points you brought up on our images, and I'll agree with Terry on what he said earlier that the images this evening they were very, very good. They were excellent. Trish, do you have any final words of wisdom for us before we set forth for home here?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, I think the thing I most wanted to talk about was the black and white, just because, infinite color falls into basically 10 zones. And so I just wanted to mention that, being that most of your members are probably shooting strictly digital and aren't working in a dark room. And since darkroom came first, it's kind of nice to keep in mind sort of some of those traditional goals. So, but I thought your images were beautiful. You're right. They just were maybe creating art or thinking of photography as art is what has enhanced the subject matter.
There you go. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, well, I know personally, I've spent many hours with my fingers in a tray full of fixer. From back in the day, I spent many many years working in both color and black and white darkroom. So, but yeah, and to your point about the black and white and having a full range of black to white, I see that too, that some people don't take advantage of getting that good contrast range. So I would say to everyone, if you want to up your black and white game, make sure that you come see our program meeting next month in a couple of weeks when Rick Hulbert will be talking all about black and white, shooting black and white, and recognizing a good black and white image. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody on Zoom or in the room?
None from here. Thanks. Thank you, Trish.
Okay.
Trish,
Seems
thank
like
you very much.
folks are anxious to go home.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you so much again, Trish. And thank you for everyone who submitted images and for all of you who came to attend the meeting. We appreciate it very much. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.